afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Middle East African Chamber's Power Hour Business Development Virtual Live Stream, proudly presented by Google. I am Fidel Mieso, CEO of the Middle East African Chamber, and I'll be your host this evening. It is great to have you join us for another exciting episode where we bring you invaluable resources on pricing strategies. This presentation explores effective pricing strategies to help businesses maximize profits and remain competitive. Attendees will learn how to identify cost structures, calculate break-even points, and implement different pricing strategies. Pricing is important for small business owners to get right because it impacts profitability, influences customer perception, and competitive positioning. We are thrilled to have a very special guest with us this evening, Ms. Kiley Phelps, SBDC Center Director for Omaha NBDC. Kiley is here to talk to us about pricing strategies for small business success. Please help me welcome her. Thank you for joining us today, Kiley.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. And like I said before, Kiley served as the SBDC Center Director for the Omaha region at the Nebraska Business Development Center, NBDC. Her counties of service include Douglas County, Sarpy, and Washington. Kiley is an Omaha native and committed to fostering economic growth through entrepreneurship in her community. In her current role, she leads a team of graduate assistants and works closely with business owners to navigate critical aspects of the business development process, including business planning, financial strategies, and operational improvements. Ms. Phelps also oversees outreach initiatives, delivers training programs, and cultivates relationships with key stakeholders to strengthen the regional business ecosystem. Her professional background spans a variety of areas, including data analysis and corporate purchasing. Before becoming the Omaha Center Director, Kiley was working as a graduate assistant business consultant for NBDC. A passionate advocate for continuous learning and improvement, Kiley has earned her bachelor's and master's degrees in business from UNO and recently completed the Economic Development Finance Professional Certification course. Kiley is passionate about helping business owners succeed and playing a key role in growing Omaha's thriving entrepreneur community. Today, Kiley will share her expertise on pricing strategies, techniques to boost profits, competitiveness, and customer loyalty. Without any further ado, please help me in welcoming Kiley. Kiley, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yes. And now you are going to have about 40 minutes to do your presentation. All right. You may take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Fidel, for that great introduction. And so without further ado, this is going to be pricing strategies to maximize your profit. But first, I'm going to talk just a little bit about what is the Nebraska Business Development Center, because we are able to help in a variety of different ways. So Fidel was talking a little bit about the Small Business Development Center, which is where I work and help business owners. But really, the Nebraska Business Development Center is a place that if you're looking for assistance to start or grow a business, we have resources that can help navigate what that looks like for your business. So we have 3 programs that are direct to client facing. So individual kind of one-on-one consultations. And then we also have a connecting platform, which I'll talk about in just a second. So the first one up at the top is our Apex Accelerators. And these consultants can help navigate what it looks like to sell to the government. So at the state, local, and federal level, the government is a big purchaser for a lot of goods and services. So it can be a little bit of a complicated process. So there are people that can help navigate that. I'm going to jump around here. I'm going to talk about the innovation and technology team next. So if you have a highly scalable, high growth, kind of never been done before type product. This is a group that can kind of help navigate what that process looks like. And then I wanted to come back to the Small Business Development Center. I wanted to talk about this one last for our direct to client facing programs because it is where I work. So, and it's kind of where this pricing strategy fits in to our realm of portfolio here. So our services are provided at no cost because we get some of our funding from the SBA and also from the university. We are located at Manlow Hall, but there are me or me equivalents all across the state. If you are looking for assistance to start or grow your business, we help with things like business planning, financial projections, budgeting. Pricing is one of those that we help out with. If you are also looking to expand, we can do a benchmark analysis and see if the time is right for that. We also have a lot of market research tools that we can use to kind of help determine if there's a customer base and related back to pricing, what are your competitors charging? And then our final program is SourceLink Nebraska, and this is a resource navigation tool. It is a very well built out platform. So there's over 900 low cost or no cost resources across the state of Nebraska, which if you are like me, 900 would just be overwhelming. I would be paralyzed by hearing that number. So there's also a consultant that can help kind of navigate all those resources. So you can go to sourcelinknebraska.com. It's called a personal action plan. And this is also a free service as well. But there's a 30 questionnaire just asking about general questions for your business, kind of maybe what you're having a hard time with, what are your products and services, where are you located, and then from there the consultant will look at the answers to those questions and then give you a checklist, a personal action plan, basically warm introduction of here's those first 5 resources that you should go to get the help that you are seeking. So we at the Nebraska Business Development Center really do a lot, and I'm always happy to talk with anyone about their business in whatever way that means for them. So just to provide a little context, that is what NBDC does. And then we can move on to the pricing, which is what you are all here for. So Fidel kind of talked a little bit about some of these objectives. So with this presentation, I am going to hopefully teach you that there are several different strategies that you can use that can be effective for your business. Some might be more effective for certain industries than others. An important part of pricing is understanding your break-even point. So that is where you are covering all of your costs. So we will talk about that. There's a little bit of math involved, but I don't want to scare you. It is simple math. And then we can look at some market insights and customer perceptions, which will also play into pricing. And then finally, pricing is something that can be pretty fluid for business owners. And as your expenses are changing, it is also likely that you will need to adjust your pricing as well. So we'll kind of learn how to do that with this presentation. Okay, so first up, we're going to kind of lay the foundation, just talking about some different strategies that kind of come into play. So maybe start thinking about which strategy you want to do for your products and services. The first one is going to be the most traditional form of pricing, so cost-oriented pricing. And this is as simple as figuring out what were my expenses, and then I'm going to add a percentage. So it's very simple to use. I think like companies that use this, like clothing companies, like bakeries, the common kind of services, and products that are fairly simple. There are a few drawbacks to this, even though it's like a pretty simple, straightforward to use strategy. It doesn't really take into consideration like your competitors' pricing. You can kind of make it so that it does take that into consideration. So for example, if you figure out your costs are $5 to make your product, and then you look at your competitors and kind of compare what they're charging, and you can see that with your percent markup, where do you fall? And if you are way above or way below, maybe you need to adjust that markup. So it takes a little bit of an extra step to kind of take into consideration the competitors' pricing. And it doesn't really take into consideration things like demand or market potential. But again, it's a very simple, kind of easy to implement strategy that a lot of business owners use, and it's pretty effective. Okay, so this next form of pricing, you guys have all probably heard of it, but it's similar to how Netflix will say, oh, your bill for this month is $10, or you don't have to pay anything for your first month. And then after you try it out and you like it, you then have a bigger cost. It's kind of like how the cable companies also, after a year of service, they will give you a higher price. And it always seems like it's cheaper to change companies than to stick with that increase that they're giving. And that's only because they're offering new customers that kind of incentive to switch and get people in the door. So that's another strategy. The hope is that like you lead people in with a less expensive price point and that you keep them, because honestly, switching companies for whatever provider or whatever service is kind of a lot of work. So they're hoping that people will just stay with that company and they will be okay with that higher pricing down the line. I don't know if that's always the case because people do switch. I'm thinking like insurance companies, you can get less premiums if you kind of switch or shop around. But this is an effective strategy that works for kind of those service type businesses that have kind of maybe like a monthly kind of membership or a similar reoccurring revenue structure. Okay, so then there is some demand-oriented pricing. So this is going to change with the demand levels. This is like Econ 101. What is the supply like? What is the demand like? And that's what the pricing is going to be. So right now, a very relevant example is the price of eggs. So the supply of the eggs has gone down quite a bit because of the bird flu, and when that happens, everyone gets worried. So then they start buying like crazy. It's also kind of like toilet paper during the pandemic, that everyone was worried toilet paper was going to run out. So then everyone buys like crazy, and then the demand increases. The supply is already down. So that causes your pricing to go up, because eventually it will all level out when the eventually there'll be a price point where people aren't wanting to pay that price anymore. So then the demand will go down, and then the pricing will go down eventually as well. Another example of this is like plane tickets. So if you are wanting to travel like over the Christmas holidays or something, the airfare is going to be way more expensive than if you go on a random Tuesday in June. So that is kind of taking into consideration demand. Since more people are going to be traveling, I can charge a higher price. The other example that I have on the screen is things like produce. So that's a very seasonal type business. So in the summer, okay, I'm probably not the best example of like talking about fruits and vegetables, but, there's certain seasons for like tomatoes and peppers and onions and things like that. So when it is in season, you're probably charging a a lower price because it's easier to get and you have more supply. But if it is out of season, it's harder to get. So then you're probably going to end up paying a higher price. So this does come with a lot of drawbacks. And one of them is that it is hard to calculate what that demand is going to be. It's also hard to predict. So I think going back to the eggs, there were some talks of the bird flu happening, but I don't think people necessarily realized all of the downstream effects that would have, especially when it comes to eggs. So I think it's hard to figure out what that increase in demand is going to be like. And it's also really difficult to adjust your prices quick enough to keep up with those changes because they can change so fast, these macro kind of economic trends. And it can be a lot of work, especially if you are a small business, to kind of try to keep up with that constantly changing demand. But the places like the airlines are able to do that because they probably have a whole software dedicated to tracking demands and how many people are viewing certain routes and things and able to adjust from there. But yeah, so demand-oriented pricing, just another strategy that we are seeing especially with eggs right now. Okay, and then so this is some ways that you can price, for example. So it's playing with psychology a little bit, which honestly pricing is a lot of psychology. So there's different ways to do this. So for example, $9.99 versus $10. They're basically the same price, but for whatever reason, people think $9.99 seems like it is so much cheaper than paying $10. So that's a very effective pricing that a lot of businesses use is like, well, I wouldn't pay $10, but I'm paying $9.99, so I'm happy. That's a very common pricing strategy. And then things like bundle deals, so bundle pricing, you are kind of convincing people to purchase more of something, and it's going to be cheaper if they purchase that bundle instead of like purchasing all of the individual items. So the example is the Burger King 5 for $4, which I'm not totally sure if it's $4 anymore. But honestly, like if I go to Burger King, 5 items is way too much, but I wouldn't be able to get like 3 of those items for $4. So then they just kind of convinced me that it's a good deal. My psychology is saying, oh, I need all of the items. And honestly, $4 is such a good deal. So I want to purchase it. So it's playing with psychology of people liking to think that they are getting a good deal or something is on sale. And it is not necessarily on sale. It is just kind of a strategy to get people to think that it is. Okay, so I was kind of talking a little bit about the freemium model a little bit ago, but this is maybe more so towards Netflix where, you get to sign up for free and you get used to all of the cool benefits and the value that comes with that subscription or whatever service you are paying for. And then maybe there are some extra premium services that will come with an added fee. So I think like Prime Video, you can go ad free, or Spotify, you can go ad free for an extra price. It's free to create a Spotify account, but if I don't want to listen to the ads, then I pay $6 a month or something. So the freemium model is really getting people into the door to see the value of the product or service they're offering, and then kind of trying to sell the customers on the additional features, the additional places of value. And subscription, so that's reoccurring revenue. So businesses can count on kind of a similar revenue for each of the months. There might be some people dropping off, but there should also be people rejoining the subscription as well. And yeah, charges a fee to access the product. Like Netflix, like a lot of gym memberships follow the subscription model. They also might incorporate freemium as well, where you might get a free month's trip to the gym, and then after that, you have to pay your monthly dues. Okay, so then we are going to kind of switch gears a little bit after we had talked all about some different strategies. So kind of be thinking about what works best for your business. So on this part, I'm kind of going to walk you through a break-even analysis. If you have a pen and paper, you can kind of follow along, or you can kind of reference this later if you wish. We're going to first look at your expenses. All you need to do is make a list of all of the expenses your business can incur. This can include things like your rent, your marketing expenses. Maybe you have a website, you do some stuff on social media, you have some flyers that you need to create, and then maybe you have the ingredients to make your product or your inputs. So you can make just a long list of what expenses you are going to have. If you can put a amount, that will be helpful later. But again, you don't have to do that all right now. I am just going to kind of walk you through how all this is going to connect. And again, you can reference this later. Okay, so I'm also giving you an example to kind of follow along. I'm calling it Kiley's Cupcake Business just because I think it has a fun ring to it and I like cupcakes. So this is my list. I took a few minutes. I made a list of what my expenses are. So rent, I pay a commercial kitchen $1,500 a month. My ingredients cost me about $1 a cupcake, and I have some utilities, insurance. I do some marketing efforts. I pay a baker $3,000 a month, and I have packaging, and I have some software. So there's a lot of expenses, and they're not necessarily categorized. So what we need to do next is figure out what type of expenses these are. Okay, so then that leads me to step 2. So you are going to categorize your expenses. And when I say categorize, we have 2 different categories that we're going to be using for this exercise. So the first one is going to be variable cost, and the other one is going to be fixed cost. And I will talk about what it means to be variable versus fixed. So starting with fixed cost, these are going to be things like your overhead. That is also another word for it because they don't change with the amount that you are selling. So some examples of this are rent, insurance, payroll. Okay, and then we have variable costs. So there's a lot of different names to variable costs. Can also be called cost of goods sold or cost of service sold. And these are unique in the sense that as your sales go up, these costs are also going to go up. So you can see on the chart that they grow kind of proportionately. So as I'm increasing my units, my variable costs are also increasing. And as my sales go down, my variable costs will also go down. So some examples of this include things like your raw materials, your ingredients, shipping, inputs to make a final product that you can calculate and say, yes, it took me X amount of quantity to make this one singular unit. Those will all be included in your variable costs. So it's important to note the differences between variable and fixed costs because variable costs you should be able to cover regardless because that will be included in your pricing. And then where fixed costs come into play is that so you have your price and then you subtract off your variable costs. So you're left with a little bit left. That's also called your contribution margin. And that little amount that's left is going to cover your fixed costs. So you need to have enough of your pricing in terms of quantity to be able to cover all of those fixed costs. So it is important to know what your costs are and know how they are structured. Okay, so here is just another example of fixed costs versus variable costs. I kind of talked about all of these already, but just real quickly, this over here on the right is your fixed costs. So rent, insurance, salary, utilities, marketing, office supplies. And I also want to make a note that fixed doesn't have to mean that they are not changing. So for example, I might spend $50 on office supplies to get my business going, and then I might not need additional office supplies for another 6 months, and then I only have to spend $20. So that cost has changed, but it is still fixed because it's not directly related to the units I am selling. This is just like simply ordering, like saying I need pens and a notepad or something. So they can change, but it still be a fixed cost. So then our variable costs, again, so any raw materials or inputs, ingredients that go into producing that final good or service. So credit card fees. So sometimes business owners will either absorb the credit card fees themselves or pass it on to the business owner. And when they pass it on to the business owner, it becomes a variable cost. So usually credit cards will charge like 3% per transaction or something in that range. Also direct labor. So this to me would be like maybe like a dentist, each patient he sees, you might need another assistant per hour. Like physical therapists, they can only see a couple patients at a certain time. So then you would need more physical therapists to increase your customer base. So direct labor, variable cost, because that's tied directly to the service. Okay, so then going back to my Kiley's Cupcake business. So I took my list. This is the same list from a few slides ago, but I just separated it out into what is fixed, what am I paying for every month versus what is variable. What am I paying for every cupcake that I am making? And you can do this with your lists as well. Separate them, categorize them, think about where they fit. Are they fixed or are they variable? And then we will move on to step 3, which is calculate your break-even point. And at this step is going to be the most math intensive, but it is not hard. We are going to do some simple addition and some subtraction and division. And that's as much math as we're going to do. So this step is kind of broken down into 3 steps because it's a formula, and I'll walk through an example too in just a second. But just as an overview, you're going to take a sum of your fixed costs. Then you are going to calculate your contribution margin. So this is the word that I was using that's going to cover your fixed costs. So that part of your pricing structure that is going to help pay for your rent. So to do that, you are going to take your selling price and you're going to subtract your variable costs per unit. Okay, and then this is where the division comes in. We're going to divide our fixed cost by the contribution margin. And then we get a break-even point. So we will talk about some analysis in just a second, but to walk you through an example here. Okay, so Kiley's Cupcakes, my break-even point, we take a sum of the fixed costs. So I pulled out my calculator, and on the left-hand side of my paper was all of my fixed costs for $5,400 a month. Okay, so then next I need to calculate what my contribution margin is going to be. So then I take my price and I subtract out my variable costs. So let's say I sell a cupcake for about $3 because that seems pretty common. I've done some research with my competitors. $3 seems like a good price point. And then I subtract out my variable costs, which were $1.50. So this includes the dollar to for all of my ingredients and the 50 cents to package it. So then the division, we are going to divide our fixed costs by our contribution margin. So 5,400 divided by $1.50. This means that I am supposed to sell 3,600 cupcakes to earn zero profit. So the break-even point is where all of our variable costs are covered and where all of our fixed costs are covered, which is a pretty good starting place. That's a good thing. It doesn't mean that we are selling at a loss, and it doesn't mean that we're earning any profit. So if I want to be profitable, then I know I need to sell more than 3,600 cupcakes. And I think the break-even point is a very kind of important tool and a quick analysis so that you can figure out, is 3,600 cupcakes beyond my capacity in a month? Or should I sell more? Do I need to adjust my cost structure to figure out maybe I can save some money on some of my expenses? Or maybe I need to increase my pricing so that I can have a higher contribution margin. So there's a lot of analysis that goes into this break-even point, but the starting place is just figuring out, okay, where am I earning zero profit so that all of my expenses are covered? And then from there, it's kind of asking yourself a series of questions of, is this within my capacity? Do I need to save on my expenses anywhere? How does my pricing compare to my competitors? Okay, so then this is looking at, what does a break-even point tell you? It honestly tells you quite a lot. So the blue line is going to be your sales, and then the red line is your total expenses. So the first couple months that this business is in business, their expenses are greater than their sales. So they are operating at a loss. And then when you get to this little intersection right here in about the middle of the screen, that is where your sales are going to overcome your expenses. So you're going to be earning a profit. And then it looks like, you continue to earn a profit, hopefully for a long time. So this is just a good analysis to know, and kind of this is just a visual representation of what is happening with the break-even point. Okay, so then I was kind of alluding to this a little bit, but step 4 is to analyze your results. So I personally think 3,600 cupcakes seems like a lot, maybe because I'm only working at the business part-time. So what can I do to adjust kind of that threshold? And it might be adjusting my pricing. It might be changing my expenses or working with a different supplier and maybe getting a better rate. So there are many options to kind of analyze what those results mean. So doing some market research is like doing like a competitive analysis and comparing where their pricing is at, seeing how much they're able to sell. We can help with market research quite a bit at the Nebraska Business Development Center. Analyzing results is also just a really good time to kind of self-reflect and figure out, you as the business owner, what is your capacity? Are you being realistic with yourself? Are you maybe being too optimistic? How can you adjust to make this seem like it is more realistic and doable if it maybe isn't? So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of analyze the break-even point. So I'm going to analyze Kiley's cupcakes for myself. So I am going to ask myself maybe these questions. So is my proposed selling price reasonable for my target audience? So if I am just targeting maybe families, I think $3 a cupcake seems pretty reasonable. But if I was targeting maybe like a health conscious, single person, I think they might be willing to pay a little bit more to get healthy cupcakes because my ingredients would probably be more expensive. So I could give them like a cupcake at a little bit higher price point, and that would be a better fit for that target audience than a family who's wanting cupcakes for a birthday party. And then that's also kind of related to how does my proposed price compare to my competitors? So if I am selling cupcakes for $15, I don't think I will have many customers because there's not a lot of cupcakes for $15, but there's cupcakes for $4, $5. So there's even cupcakes for $2. So $3 is kind of within those reasonable range for similar offerings. And then the question that I think is most important is if I can realistically sell enough units or cupcakes to cover all of the costs that I identified while I was doing my break-even point. If you are happy and you think that, yes, it is realistic, then that's a great sign. Maybe your pricing is pretty sound. If you don't feel like you can cover all your costs, well, that's okay too. That's a starting point, because maybe, like I mentioned before, you can make adjustments with your break-even point. It's a pretty simple formula. So if you need to play around with some of your inputs, you are more than welcome to. And then since I am a cupcake business, one of the ingredients is eggs. Well, what happens if my expenses increase? Well, the cost of eggs right now is crazy expensive, as we all know. But what do I need to do with that information? So do I need to temporarily pass on that increase to my customers? So like another example, like Waffle House is adding an extra like quarter charge for people who order eggs. That's an option. Maybe if it is more of a long-term expense increase, maybe I need to readjust my pricing structure a little bit so that I can continue to maintain a positive cash flow. I think with a lot of restaurants, it can get tricky to kind of remember that if the cost of your ingredients is increasing and it's been continual, then you might need to consider also increasing your pricings because you won't be able to absorb those ingredient increases for forever. So I think it can be a time to evaluate if your expenses are increasing, what does that do to my pricing? Do I need to adjust? Am I okay? Maybe if it's a long-term issue, you need to adjust your pricing. If it's just a short-term temporary thing, maybe you're able to absorb that pricing, or maybe you have to pass it on to your customers for a brief little bit. So that one is tricky to predict because you don't necessarily know what economic factors are happening, but it is something to kind of be mindful of and keep an eye on is your expenses when you are thinking about pricing. Okay, so then this is a really small, tiny slide, so I'm sorry, but this is just an example kind of what I was talking about with the break-even point and the contribution margin. So we at the Nebraska Business Development Center, we have a couple different pricing templates that we use, and this is one of them. So product pricing worksheet, and basically it goes through those exact same steps. So looking at the variable cost on a per unit basis, comparing it to your competitors, what are my fixed costs, and then this will kind of do the math for you a little bit. But this is just a screenshot, so it doesn't actually do the math. It's just here as an example. Okay, and then we can also do a similar kind of setup with services. So if you are going to bill by the hour, this is what an example of that would look like. I'm not going to talk too much about that one because I think it makes more sense to talk about the pricing goods portion. But just another way to kind of calculate and do the same thing of kind of what I was just explaining with the break-even point. Okay, so then the monitor and adjust section of pricing. So there's a lot of different factors that can change. So markets and demand can change, your costs can increase. Maybe customer preferences are going to change, and your pricing is also going to need to adapt to that so that you can remain profitable. You can make sure that your pricing is in alignment with your business goals. So how do you go about monitoring and adjusting your pricing, or even figuring out if you need to adjust your pricing? So first, you're going to monitor your costs regularly. How are your margins? Are they being maintained? Are they shrinking? If they're shrinking, maybe that's kind of where the issue falls. So if you use like any bookkeeping software like QuickBooks, or even if you just use Excel, it can be an easy way to kind of monitor your costs and figure out if your margins are stable. So then you will also need to kind of continually analyze demand and your competitor pricing and see, okay, so if somebody introduces a new product, what is that effect going to be on my product and my pricing? If my competitors change my pricing, well, I need to change my pricing. So that question, I kind of think of the example of like gas stations across the street from each other, how they will like be 5 cents lower if you go across the street, and then 2 hours later it switches whoever's lower. So yeah, just comparing to your competitors, what are they doing? Just kind of keep an eye on that. So listen to customer feedback is quite important as well, because if, going back to my example of my $15 cupcake, maybe I get feedback that says, I'm not buying a cupcake for $15. Maybe if I buy a mini cake, it could be $15, but a cupcake I wouldn't pay $15 for. So then me as the business owner, I can listen to that feedback and I can see what my customers have been saying so that I can make sure that I am able to give them something that they see as valuable. And that's kind of the goal, is to continually learn from your customers' feedback. And then another thing to monitor is when is your busy season? So this is kind of related to the demand pricing. So maybe ice cream is more expensive in the summer months because everyone wants ice cream, but maybe during the winter months, I can get a sale. Maybe this week even there's a sale on ice cream because nobody wants ice cream right now. So trying to get customers into the door for that could be like a price adjustment, or maybe consider a sale. And then the final kind of consideration for monitoring and adjusting is know when to hold firm. So I've talked a lot about adjusting pricing, but you don't always have to adjust pricing. You can still run a successful business when you keep your pricing consistent, and maybe it's not a matter of adjusting your pricing. Maybe it's a matter of trying to figure out a different way to cut back on your expenses, maybe elsewhere for the business. So your customers don't have to feel the effects of that necessarily. Okay, so kind of wrapping up, I wanted to include the different ways that you can connect with the Nebraska Business Development Center. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can visit our website, nbdc.unomaha.edu, for more information or to just connect with us. And then I wanted to include my contact information if you had any questions or anything that didn't get addressed during this live, so that you will have that for your reference.
Thank you so much for such an informative presentation, Kiley. We really appreciate that. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. We do have some questions, one question in the comment section, and at this time we'd like to open the floor for all our viewers to please go ahead and enter your questions in the chat, and Kiley will be more than happy to address them, and we'll keep the questions going. The first question we have here for Kiley is, what about volume purchase? If you buy more flour or packaging, then the per unit cost actually goes down, correct?
Yes.
That's for my last one.
Absolutely. That is a good question. So that is called economies of scale. So you buy in bulk and the per unit cost goes down, which is a good thing. So, if I'm buying 100 pounds of flour, it's probably going to be cheaper if I just buy the little half pound little thing of flour. So this is a really good kind of strategy that if you are able to have enough customers that I would need 100 pounds of flour before it goes bad, then I can kind of pass on those cost savings to my customers. So for example, like Walmart is known as being a low-cost leader, so they have less expensive pricing, but it's not because they have like cheap products necessarily. It's because they have efficient supply chains that they're able to kind of pass that on to their customers. So yeah, absolutely. Buying in bulk, you will get kind of price breaks. And when I used to work in purchasing, that was what we would always try to figure out is what is our demand going to be and how many units can we purchase? What is the minimum to get the price break so that we can kind of maximize that order and be able to save some money and kind of pass it on to customers too.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And I hope Elisha is still online so that he gets the answer to his question, or he can go back and watch the live stream later on so that he can get that. I do have some of my own questions for you so we can keep things going. Thank you so much. You've really broken this down for someone who has been in business but has been struggling with how to price their goods or just how to make sure that they are making profits, right? Because most of us go into business because we want to make profits, but then oftentimes, usually within those first 5 years, a lot of business owners struggle, because they usually tell you, most people will tell you, when you're getting into business, like the first 5 years are not the years when you're thinking about or that you should be expecting to make so much profit. But at the same time, nobody goes into business to make a loss or to be losing money. We all want to make some type of profit. So thank you for sharing these tips for how business owners should strategize, in order to make profits. I do have a question for you. Can you explain again how different pricing models like cost-oriented, demand-oriented, and psychological pricing goals work, and which industry benefit most from each? I know you went over it a little bit, but if you can please just break it down a little bit, because I know we have some viewers going and coming back, and some who may have just joined us within the last maybe 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I think it is, I don't really want to put a blanket statement about what kind of pricing structure is best, because it depends on the industry. So like when I was talking about demand-oriented pricing, and I gave some examples about the airlines, the farmers markets, eggs right now. So things that are going to be changing pretty quickly. There's going to be a little bit more stability with things like restaurants, hair salons, clothing boutiques. I kind of tend to think of those as like your Main Street businesses. So that might be a little bit more psychological pricing. You look at a menu and everything is $13.99 or $10.99. So everything that ends in 99 kind of symbolizes a little bit of a psychological pricing that, it's not $15, it's only $14.99. And so I think it's kind of about figuring out what's a right fit. And you can certainly do a combination. So you can do traditional pricing. So if you analyze what your costs are and then you add a percentage markup to it, but then maybe you employ some psychological pricing strategies as well. So you can kind of do a combination of the strategies that are going to be a best fit for your business. And then I also wanted to mention that a lot of my presentation is focused on physical goods because it's easy to kind of quantify what your expenses are. But I also wanted to talk about services a little bit, because I think a lot of service-based businesses tend to sell themselves short with their pricing, which can kind of impact that kind of 5-year outlook, like what you were talking about, Fidel. So the main expense with a service is the business owner's time. So if I am if I am cutting hair or if I'm doing makeup or designing clothes, a lot of my expense is really my time, and my time is worth something. And I just often see a lot of business owners maybe trying to sell themselves short to build up to that audience, but then they maybe don't increase their prices down the road because customer loyalty, they're trying to be nice to their customers. But if the business owner isn't being properly valued for their time, I think that it's going to be hard to keep the business going past that kind of 5-year mark. And I think specifically with services, they tend to struggle a little bit more because it's hard to figure out what is my time worth. Whereas if I'm making a physical product, I can easily pull out my calculator and figure out exactly what it cost me to make that one unit. But time is a little bit more arbitrary to value.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kiley. And it's interesting you say that because we deal with a lot of business owners here at the Middle East African Chamber, where especially during the pitch black competition, right? Where when they're pitching and you ask them, okay, so how much are you making, or what's your cost per good, or you ask them questions like that. Some people will tell you, well, I haven't really been paying myself. Or I'm not making enough to be paying myself. Or I'm just currently working from my home. I don't have a space yet, so I'm not paying for the space. So these are all the money that they are not accounting for in their business. Yet they don't really know, they can't really quantify how much they're making, how much they're losing, how much, like everything is just confused because they think just because they are working out of their home, they shouldn't be taking into consideration how much renting a space will actually cost. And they're not putting that into their business. That is a very bad business strategy because at the end of the day, one day you're going to have to leave your home and actually pay for space. And now all of a sudden, your prices are going to jump through the roof and your clients are going to be wondering what just happened here. You didn't used to charge us that much. Well, now all of a sudden your eyes are open because you realize you have been doing yourself a disservice all this while, not accounting for the space and your time and all these other things you've been taking for granted because you thought, okay, because you were working from home, you should not have been accounting for that. So can you please just clarify a little bit more on those things so that our business owners can be a little more, I don't want to say responsible, but more accountable. Be more accountable for their own time and all the resources that they invested in their business so they can have more profit. And we do have a couple of questions here. There, I'll let you address that and then we'll go to those questions. We only have 7 minutes, so we have to wrap up at some point.
I'll talk quick. So I think that's a good point that you bring up because business owners see maybe it's a little less risky if I'm going to start running the business from my house. But then I have to consider, maybe you plan for the worst case scenario. Maybe you need to budget in a small amount for potential rent if you know that you want to get to renting a space. Run the numbers, figure out what that cost would be like, because you're right, you don't want to just go into a new space and then boom, double your pricing because you're going to lose your customer base. So I think you need to take some time and kind of pre-plan. What are your goals for the business? Do I want to stay as a home-based business forever, or do I want to grow and expand? If I want to grow and expand, maybe I need to be thinking about what that cost would be so that I have it in my head when I'm kind of coming up with my pricing structure. So hopefully I answered that quickly so that we can quickly and efficiently and effectively so that we can get to the questions in the chat.
Thank you. So I have some comments and a question. Ria Vincent says, I want to make sure I price my products properly to pay myself. But if I'm not getting consistent business as a dessert caterer, it hurts my business to pay myself, it seems. And she says, to my comment, she says, I guess she meant I grew up from a cottage bakery into a commercial kitchen, and I had to grow through that change also. Also, the fear of having a value-based pricing, but losing business, just like you said.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things happening. I mean, that's exciting that you grew from a cottage-based business to a place. I think, okay, so I lost my train of thought. Hang on a second. Okay, so growing pricing. Okay, I think there can be some challenges with that growth. And a service that we do is we will do a benchmark analysis. So a lot of business owners do struggle to kind of pay themselves. But again, it's kind of like thinking, you don't go into business to lose money. You go into business to be profitable. What does that mean to be profitable? Well, to pay yourself. So we do a benchmark analysis. We can pull an industry report and we can compare the cost structure of a certain industry to industry averages. So we can see, okay, what does a typical bakery rent cost? And we will take it as a percentage of revenue. So it all kind of evens out, makes it an even playing field. And we can compare and contrast and see, okay, so if the industry average for rent is 10% of revenue, maybe I do some analysis and I show, okay, so your rent was 15% of revenue. Well, that can kind of be concerning because obviously it's quite a bit higher. So then it's looking and figuring out, well, why is it a little bit higher? Maybe it's revenue. Your revenue is not as high as you anticipated, or maybe there's some things that we could do differently with marketing. So that can lead to a whole series of different questions about trying to figure out if you're able to pay yourself. I hope that all business owners can pay themselves, but I know that's kind of one of the first sacrifices that business owners tend to make is like they'll forego their salary so that they can keep the business afloat or pay their employees. So it's definitely a consideration.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kiley. That was awesome. That's great. I'd like to just want to give you one last thanks, a show of appreciation for just taking the time to join us tonight and go over pricing strategies for small business success. We're at the last few minutes of our Power Hour here. I'd just like to go over some quick announcements before we round up here. First will be our Gratitude Gala coming up in November. Nominations for the MAC 2025 Gratitude Gala awards are still open. They were open since January and they will go through July 31st. So if you know any organizations or individuals that are doing great things, making great impact in the community, please take time to visit our website at www.fundmac.org and nominate someone for those great awards. Our next Power Hour is scheduled for Thursday, March 20th at 5:30 p.m. We will be discussing our upcoming trade mission. And the MAC Foundation scholarships are still open. They are now open until March 30th. So if you know any high school seniors or college students or postgraduate anybody who's interested in those fields, just make sure you let them know about our MAC Foundation scholarship applications, which are still open until March 30th. Visit www.fundmac.org also to submit your applications if you are interested in those scholarship opportunities. Pitch Black is coming up. Our preliminary rounds will be starting in March. If you know any small business owners that may benefit from some funding for their business, please refer them to our website, pitchblack.com, to submit their applications. Tomorrow, February 21st is the last day to submit your application. You have up until midnight tomorrow to go ahead and submit an application. If you have any great business idea or a great business that you've been running, or you think that this is a great idea that may be able to win you up to $15,000 seed money, go ahead and submit that application so you can invest in your business. Stay connected with us through our websites and our social media platforms to get updates on other upcoming events that we have. Your participation helps us build a stronger and more vibrant community. Kiley, thank you again so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. And I'm sure our members will find all this information extremely valuable as they look for ways to maximize profits and competitiveness as well as customer loyalty. On that note, to our audience, thank you for joining us on Power Hour this evening, and you have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.